Hi, I'm Nikki Johnson, and I have read the Daniel textbook in its entirety, and I'm using this as an exercise for introspection and ways that either my personal beliefs align or have some incongruence with the ACA Code of Ethics and what's required in the counseling profession. So before this course, I would have thought that beneficence was a moral principle that harmonized with my personal and spiritual values, but I've come to understand I was likely more aligned with non maleficence of doing no harm to others rather than what the textbook describes as actively and deliberately running towards and for the client. My grandmother used to say some people are just harder to love. And on the surface, when I think about people who are suffering or hurting in some way, my heart naturally gravitates and empathizes with their pain. But if I take a step back and I challenge myself to think about what the Code of Ethics says about beneficence, and that is working for the good of the individual and collectively for individuals in society, I recognize there are just some populations that give me more of a challenge in terms of working for their good. So this was something that I've reconciled over the course. Let me give you an example. So people who hurt animals or children, people who are really hateful in behavior or self-absorbed or egregiously inconsiderate, those are people that are not naturally aligned with some of my core values. And so I've had to reread God's word and think about what acts of love and service truly mean, not just in the counseling profession, but what we're called to do as believers. Sometimes I know I'm going to struggle to find a connection with a client, and that's the fallibility of being human, but the awareness that I've developed in this course has caused me to realize that I'm capable of extending empathy and beneficence. I while I don't have to endorse the undesired behavior. Those are two different things. So the harmonization with beneficence can happen in just simple acts of kindness. I can actively listen. I can dig into social histories to understand some of the ways that a person was shaped through their cultural differences or family dynamics that contribute to the behavior that perhaps is the difficult thing for me. The text was more of a launching pad, and it challenged me to really think about beneficence in a different way. The author uses an example of a client that intends self-harm, and to me that's much clearer than some of the complexities and nuances in what things that we're likely to encounter in this profession. So I looked at a 2024 study, and it was specific to populations that had exhibited deviant, violent behaviors. And this stemmed from high levels of substance abuse and stress, financial strain. And I don't think before this class I would have tried to peel back the layers of looking at the deviant behavior and perhaps what correlated with that behavior, contributed to that behavior. The text also talks about ethical bracketing, and that's something I want to learn more about, but it's the author discusses it as a way to really think about the delineation between how I feel personally and what's going on with the client, and ensuring that I don't impose my own principles onto the client. So I'm interested in learning more there. An ethical principle I'm still developing is a true sense of what's meant by justice. The ACA Code of Ethics defines justice as treating individuals equitably and fostering fairness and equality. And on the surface, that principle is not really problematic for me, but when I look at certain populations of people, people who are willful in their own prejudices, who mistreat others, it's challenging to consider fairness and justice when their actions seem so unfair. But I've learned it's not up to me to determine what a person deserves. I'm just still working through having more awareness. I also looked at the New Testament, and of course, I'm reminded to love God and love others means that I have to remind myself that treating people with justice and fairness, examples are all throughout the Bible, and as a believer, just continuing to stay in the Word in terms of what that means to drive me towards developing a greater sense of justice. I did look at a study that was a multicultural study, because that's, although separate from this criminal behavior in certain populations that may be are difficult. I also realize that the sheer inexperience I have in multiculturalism means that I need to understand how sometimes my behaviors are biases can come into play with how I'm treating a person justly or fairly. So I want to build that skill a little bit more. And in that 2021 study, as a way to kind of think through ethical decision making, it really looked at Western clinicians and counselors and exploring ways that non-Western healing practices can be incorporated for greater outcomes. So in that model, it emphasizes gathering information and then identifying that ethical decision, consulting with peers, and then taking that information and consulting with people who are far more experienced to formulate an ethical plan. So those are some of the ways in which I think I can benefit through ethical decision making. In the end, I've noticed that these are very complex situations, and so I'm looking forward to growing, developing in the counseling profession, and also thinking about ways that I can ensure cultural humility as well. Thank you.